All right, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're looking into some really fascinating stuff. We're talking about the Willie Lynch Letter and its connection to the transatlantic slave trade. So we've got some excerpts here from a document it's actually called Willie Lynch Letters, but this was published back in 1999. We've got that, along with, and this is where it gets interesting, some historical accounts from congressional debates on slavery. Like real congressional records.
Oh, wow.
From the late 1700s.
That's amazing. What a contrast to have those two things side by side.
It's a lot to unpack, a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah.
But one thing I think we should probably address right off the bat, the authenticity of the Willie Lynch Letter itself.
Right.
It's hotly debated. Some scholars are pretty sure it's a hoax.
I can see why.
Others argue that even if it wasn't actually written back then, it still reflects a mindset that was pretty prevalent at the time.
Yeah. You know, regardless of whether it's genuine, just the fact that it exists and has become so influential is something worth looking at.
Exactly. We're not here to, settle that whole debate.
Right.
Our goal is to understand the ideas in the letter, how they relate to, the bigger picture of slavery.
And the history surrounding it. Exactly. I mean, this letter has gained so much traction in our culture. It's really important to understand why.
It resonates, yeah.
What that says about the power dynamics of that time period. It's a fascinating thing to study.
Okay, so let's actually jump into the letter itself. It starts by describing this gathering of slave owners. They're all meeting on the banks of the James River in Virginia.
Okay.
And there's this guy, William Lynch. Supposedly, he's giving a speech where he lays out this, foolproof method for controlling enslaved people.
Interesting.
And what really struck me is how much emphasis he puts on using psychology as a tool of control.
Yeah, even more so than physical force, right?
It's almost more insidious, right? Because he's talking about turning people against each other. It's use their age, use their skin color, even their intelligence as a way to create division, distrust.
Prevent them from unifying. It's a classic divide and conquer strategy.
Totally. And it's something we still see today, obviously not just in the context of slavery.
No, absolutely not. It happens in political systems and workplaces, even within families sometimes.
Yeah. It's almost scarier than outright violence in a way.
I agree.
Because it's so subtle, so manipulative.
Yeah.
You're making people participate in their own oppression.
Exactly. And what's really chilling about the letter is how, methodically he lays it all out. He's very specific.
Like a step-by-step guide, yeah.
Right. It's like he's saying, okay, first you got to exploit their insecurities, then you play on their aspirations, pit them against each other based on, their strengths and weaknesses. And the goal is to break them, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, to create this prison in their minds.
And he doesn't just stop at interpersonal divisions. He talks about targeting enslaved women in particular.
Right. Breaking their spirits, making them dependent.
Making them more compliant, he says, which is, it's just so disturbing because, he's disrupting entire families, communities.
Right. And undermining the role of women.
Yeah.
It's been a tactic of oppression for centuries. Breaking down the family structure isolates individuals, and that makes them dependent on the very system that's oppressing them.
And then there's this whole concept of crossbreeding that he brings up.
Oh, wow.
This idea that you could, breed more docile population. It's just...
that's horrible.
Humanizing. He's talking about human beings like they're livestock.
And, this wasn't just some random cruel idea. It was based on these, pseudoscientific theories that were floating around at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they thought you could link physical characteristics with behavioral traits.
Wow.
Of course, it was all completely flawed, but they used it to justify their exploitation.
It's interesting you bring that up because there are some parallels in the congressional debates we have from the late 1700s.
Yeah, interesting.
Some arguments against slavery in those debates were definitely about morality.
Right.
But a lot of the arguments revolved around money.
Economics.
Yeah, how much money are we going to lose if we tax imported slaves?
Yeah.
It's almost like
wow,
human lives were just
line items on a balance sheet.
Yeah. There's even a part in here where they outline the specific commodities used to pay for slaves, like rolls of tobacco, rum.
Wow.
Even lengths of metal. It's crazy.
It's a stark reminder of how intertwined slavery was with the economic realities of the time. You can see how the system was designed to benefit just a handful of people at the expense of an entire population. It's really powerful. And, reading this alongside the Willie Lynch text, even if it's made up, it kind of makes sense why those methods might have resonated with slave owners.
it's mind-blowing to think about how deeply entrenched these systems were, how everything was connected to this exploitation.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it really does make you think, doesn't it? How these systems, persist. But that's why we're doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of systems, one thing that really stood out to me in the Willie Lynch letter was that whole thing about controlled language.
Oh, yeah, that was a chilling part.
Like creating a whole language to limit understanding and to prevent resistance.
Yeah, like building a linguistic prison to confine people's minds.
Exactly. Now, a made-up language like that might seem a little far-fetched, but that whole principle, that idea of suppressing language to control people, it's been used throughout history.
You're right. I mean, think about all those indigenous communities that were forced to assimilate. Their languages and cultures were actively suppressed.
Right.
Or even, think about authoritarian regimes with their censorship and propaganda.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about controlling information, shaping what people believe.
Limiting access to knowledge. It's all connected.
It's about keeping people in the dark, preventing them from questioning things.
Right. And this control over language, it can have a huge impact on a group's identity, their agency.
Oh, without a doubt.
Which kind of brings us back to that last part of the Willie Lynch letter, that really chilling remark where Black people are thanked for not supporting their own communities, for not doing business with each other. It's like they're being praised for participating in their own economic disempowerment.
Yeah. It suggests that there was a conscious effort to, keep them dependent even after slavery was officially abolished.
Right. Like Willie Lynch, whether he was real or not, his ghost is still hanging around whispering these ideas.
I know what I mean.
Of division, control.
It's like, how do we even start to dismantle something so deeply rooted?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Well, I think the first step is recognizing how it works, how these systems manifest in our lives, even in subtle ways.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, think about how we get our information today in the digital age. Who owns the platforms we use?
Right.
Who's controlling the algorithms?
It's making me think about those social media feeds that keep showing me the same type of content.
Exactly. It's like a modern version of controlled language, in a way.
Yeah.
The algorithms are shaping our understanding of the world.
And it's not just online, right? Think about the textbooks in schools, the news we consume, the stories we tell ourselves about history.
Right. It's all shaping our perceptions, our beliefs.
It's like this constant process of filtering and shaping, and we just kind of accept it.
Right. We don't even realize it most of the time.
So if we want to break free from these cycles, we need to be more critical, more aware of the forces that are shaping our views.
Absolutely. And that's not easy.
No, it's not. Where do we even begin?
I think it starts by diversifying the voices we listen to. Read books by authors from different backgrounds. Watch documentaries that challenge your worldview. Talk to people who have different opinions than you.
It's about getting outside of our comfort zones.
Yes. Get out of those echo chambers and engage with the complexity of the world.
It's not just about passively consuming information either.
No, it's about questioning, thinking critically, thinking about the sources, the biases, the agendas.
We need to be informed citizens, engaged citizens who are willing to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. We need to advocate for a more just and equitable world.
But that can feel overwhelming sometimes,
It can, absolutely. But I think even small acts of resistance can make a difference.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, imagine having a conversation with someone, like a family member, who expresses a biased viewpoint, or sharing an article on social media that highlights an injustice,
right?
Or supporting a local organization that's working for change. Those things might seem small, but they can plant seeds,
So you don't have to be a perfect activist?
No, not at all. Just start by being more mindful, more aware, more willing to speak out against injustice.
It's about taking those small steps, one at a time.
Exactly. And the more we do that, the more empowered we become, and the more we inspire others.
It's about building a collective consciousness, a movement.
Yes. That's where real change comes from collective action.
It's a reminder that we're not alone in this struggle. Together, we can overcome even the most deeply entrenched systems of oppression. So we've been really digging into how this Willie Lynch letter, whether it's real or not, can teach us about oppression, like how it goes so much deeper than just, physical force.
Right. It's about controlling minds and beliefs, getting people to, police themselves, internalize these narratives that keep those in power.
Yeah.
And then, they pass those beliefs down through generations.
It's heavy stuff. And it makes you think about the long-term impact, right? Especially when you get to that last part of the letter, where Black people are practically praised for being economically dependent.
Yeah, that's the part that really gets to me. It's like, even if we get rid of the obvious structures of oppression, there's this underlying desire to maintain control through economics, keep certain groups reliant on those in power.
It's like the ghost of Willie Lynch is still shaping our world, even if he never existed.
I know what you mean.
And it's not just like some abstract concept either. I mean, look at the racial wealth gap.
Right.
The lack of representation in leadership positions, the disparities in healthcare and education.
All of those things are connected to systems that disadvantage certain groups.
Exactly. It's not just random chance.
No, not at all. They're the result of historical forces and policies that created these inequalities.
And then sometimes those inequalities are even reinforced by systems that seem neutral on the surface.
Right, but they end up having a bigger impact on marginalized communities.
So, I mean, how do we even break free from that? Is it even possible to, like, fully dismantle systems that are so ingrained in everything?
It's a tough question, but I think it starts with awareness. Recognizing the patterns and understanding the history behind them. Once we can see how those systems work, then we can start to challenge them.
Right, and push for policies and practices that are actually equitable.
Exactly. We have to remember that equality doesn't just magically happen. It takes effort and constant vigilance.
Yeah, and being willing to, like, really confront some uncomfortable truths about our own biases and the systems that we might benefit from.
It's about realizing that this isn't just about fixing other people.
Right.
We all have a role to play in this. We need to recognize our own privileges and use our voices and our resources to advocate for change.
So it's both a personal and collective journey, right?
Absolutely. We need to work on ourselves, examine our own beliefs, but we also need to work to change the structures that keep these systems in place.
It's a constant process, right? Like, we're always learning and unlearning and relearning.
Exactly. We need to stay open to new perspectives, be willing to challenge the status quo.
Well, we've covered a lot today, from the transatlantic slave trade to this Willie Lynch letter.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. But it's so important to understand this history
I agree.
if we want to create a better future.
And the fact that we're having this conversation, that we're even trying to grapple with these difficult issues, it gives me hope, honestly. He shows that people are ready to face these challenges head on.
It's a reminder that even when things seem really overwhelming, we have the power to make a difference.
And that power comes from collective action, speaking out against injustice, challenging the status quo.
And building a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
That's what it's all about.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yes. Thank you.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep pushing for that better future.
Absolutely.